happy of all the nonsense. He stopped laughing. He put his hand into the glove hole of his front door and let it know his touch. The front door slid open. Of course I'm happy. What does she think? I'm not? He asked the quiet rooms. He stood looking up at the ventilator grill in the hall and suddenly remembered that something lay hidden behind the grill, something that seemed to peer down at him now. He moved his eyes quickly away. What a strange meeting on a strange night. He remembered nothing like it save one afternoon a year ago when he had met an old man in the park and they had talked. Montag shook his head. He looked at a blank wall. The girl's face was there, really quite beautiful in memory, astonishing, in fact. She had a very thin face like a dial of a small clock seen faintly in a dark room in the middle of a night, when you waken to see the time and see the clock telling you the hour and the minute and the second, with a white silence and a glowing, all certainty in knowing what it has to tell of the night passing swiftly on toward further darknesses, but moving also toward a new sun. What? Asked Montag of that other self, the subconscious idiot that ran babbling, at times quite independent of will, habit, and conscience. He glanced back at the wall. How like a mirror, too, her face. Impossible. For how many people did you know that refracted your own light to you? People were more often. He searched for a simile, found one in his work. Torches, blazing away until they whiffed out. How rarely did other people's faces take of you and throw back to you your own expression, your own innermost trembling thought. What incredible power of identification the girl had. She was like the eager watcher of a marionette show, anticipating each flicker of an eyelid, each gesture of his hand, each flick of a finger, the moment before it began. How long had they walked together? 3 minutes? 5? Yet how large that time seemed now. How immense a figure she was on the stage before him. What a shadow she threw on the wall with her slender body. He felt that if his eye itched, she might blink. And if the muscles of his jaws stretched imperceptibly, she would yawn long before he would. Why, he thought, now that I think of it, she almost seemed to be waiting for me there, in the street, so damn late at night. He opened the bedroom door. It was like coming into the cold marbled room of a mausoleum after the moon was set. Complete darkness, not a hint of the silver world outside. The windows tightly shut, the chamber a tomb world where no sound from the great city could penetrate. The room was not empty. He listened. The little mosquito, delicate dancing hum in the air. The electrical murmur of a hidden wasp snug in its special pink warm nest. The music was almost loud enough so he could follow the tune. He felt his smile slide away, melt, fold over and down on itself like a tallow skin, like the stuff of a fantastic candle burning too long and now collapsing and now blown out. Darkness. He was not happy. He was not happy. He said the words to himself. He recognized this as the true state of affairs. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going to knock on her door and ask for it back. Without turning on the light, he imagined how this room would look. His wife stretched on the bed, uncovered and cold, like a body displayed on the lid of a tomb, her eyes fixed to the ceiling by invisible threads of steel, immovable, and in her ears the little seashells, the thimble radio tamped tight, and an electronic ocean of sound, of music and talk, coming in on the shore of her unsleeping mind. The room was indeed empty. Every night the waves came in and bore her off on their great tide of sound, floating her wide-eyed toward morning. There had been no night in the last 2 years that Mildred had not swum the sea, had not gladly gone down in it for the 3rd time. Interesting that this book was written so long ago, and yet they're talking about you should see little Apple earbuds here. The room was cold, but nonetheless he felt he could not breathe. He did not wish to open the drapes and open the French windows, for he did not want the moon to come into the room. So with the feeling of a man who will die in the next hour for lack of air, he felt his way toward his open, separate, and therefore cold bed. An instant before his foot hit the object on the floor, he knew he would hit such an object. It was not unlike the feeling he had experienced before turning the corner and almost knocking the girl down. His foot, sending vibrations ahead, received back echoes of the small barrier across its path even as the foot flung. His foot kicked, the object gave a dull clink and slid off in darkness. He stood very straight and listened to the person on the dark bed in the completely featureless night. The breath coming out the nostrils was so faint it stirred only the furthest fringes of life. A small leaf, a black feather, a single fiber of hair. He still did not want outside light. He pulled out his igniter, felt the salamander etched on its silver disk, gave it a flick. 2 moonstones looked up at him in the light of his small, handheld fire. 2 pale moonstones buried in a creek of clear water over which the life of the world ran, not touching them. Mildred! Her face was like a snow-covered island upon which rain might fall, but it felt no rain. Over which clouds might pass their moving shadows, but she felt no shadow. There was only the singing of the thimble wasps in her tamped-shut ears, and her eyes all glass, and breath going in and out, softly, faintly, in and out her nostrils, and her not caring whether it came or went or came. The object he had sent tumbling with his foot now glinted under the edge of his own bed, the small crystal bottle of sleeping tablets which earlier today had been filled with 30 capsules, and which now lay uncapped and empty in the light of the tiny flare. As he stood there, the sky over the house screamed. There was a tremendous ripping sound as if 2 giant hands had torn 10,000 miles of black linen down the seam. Montag was cut in half. He felt his chest chopped down and split apart, the jet bombers going over, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 6 of them, 9 of them, 12 of them, one, and another, and another, and another, did all the screaming for him. He opened his own mouth and let their shriek come down and out between his bared teeth. The house shook. The flare went out in his hand. The moonstones vanished. He felt his hands plunge toward the telephone. The jets were gone. He felt his lips move, brushed the mouthpiece of the phone, emergency hospital, a terrible whisper. He felt that the stars had been pulverized by the sound of the black jets, and that in the morning the earth would be covered with their dust like a strange snow. That was his idiot thought as he stood shivering in the dark, and let his lips go on moving and moving. They had this machine. They had 2 machines, really. One of them slid down into your stomach like a black cobra, down an echoing well looking for all the old water and old time gathered there. It drank up the green matter that flowed to the top in a slow boil. Did it drink of the darkness? Did it suck out all the poisons accumulated with the years? It fed in silence with an occasional sound of inner suffocation and blind searching. It had an eye. The impersonal operator of the machine could, by wearing a special optical helmet, gaze into the soul of the person whom he was pumping out. What did the eye see? He did not say. He saw, but did not see what the eye saw. The entire operation was not unlike the digging of a trench in one's yard. The woman on the bed was no more than a hard stratum of marble they had reached. Go on, anyway, shove the board down, flush up the emptiness, if such a thing could be brought out in the throb of the suction snake. The operator stood smoking a cigarette. The other machine was working too. The other machine, operated by an equally impersonal fellow in non-sustainable reddish-brown coveralls. This machine pumped all of the blood from the body and replaced it with fresh blood and serum. "Gotta clean it out both ways," said the operator, standing over the silent woman. "No use getting the stomach if you don't clean the blood. Leave that stuff in the blood, and the blood hits the brain like a mallet. Bang! A couple thousand times, and the brain just gives up. Just quits." "Stop it," said Montag. Just saying, said the operator. Are you done? Said Montag. They shut the machines up tight. We're done. His anger did not even touch them. They stood with the cigarette smoke curling around their noses and into their eyes without making them blink or squint. That's $50. First, why don't you tell me if she'll be all right? Sure, she'll be okay. We got all the mean stuff right in our suitcase here. It can't get at her now. As I said, you take out the old, put in the new, and you're okay. Neither of you is an MD. Why didn't they send an MD from emergency? Hell, the operator's cigarette moved on his lips. We get these cases 9 or 10 a night. Got so many starting a few years ago, we had the special machines built. With the optical lens, of course. That was new. The rest is ancient. You don't need an MD. Case like this, all you need is 2 handymen. Clean up the problem in half an hour. Look. He started for the door. We gotta go. Just had another call on the old ear thimble. 10 blocks from here. Someone else just jumped off the cap of a pillbox. Call if you need us again. Keep her quiet. We got a contraceptive in her. She'll wake up hungry. So long. And the men with the cigarettes in their straight-lined mouths, the men with the eyes of puffed adders, took up their load of machine and tube, their case of liquid melancholy, and the slow dark sludge of nameless stuff, and strolled out the door. Montag sank down into the chair and looked at this woman. Her eyes were closed now, gently, and he put out his hand to feel the warmness of breath on his palm. Mildred, he said at last. There are too many of us, he thought. There are billions of us, and that's too many. Nobody knows anyone. Strangers come and violate you. Strangers come and cut your heart out. Strangers come and take your blood. Good God, who were those men? I never saw them before in my life. Half an hour passed. The bloodstream in this woman was new, and it seemed to have done a new thing to her. Her cheeks were very pink, and her lips were very fresh and full of color, and they looked soft and relaxed. Someone else's blood there. If only someone else's flesh and brain and memory. If only they could have taken her mind along to the dry cleaners and emptied the pockets and steamed and cleansed it and reblocked it and brought it back to the morning. If only. He got up and put back the drapes and opened the windows wide to let the night air in. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Was it only an hour ago Clarice McClellan in the street and him coming in the dark room and his foot kicking the little crystal bottle? Only an hour, but the word had melted down and sprung in a new and colorless form. Laughter blew across the moon-colored lawn from the house of Clarice and her father and mother and the uncle who seemed so quietly and so earnestly. Above all, their laughter was relaxed and hearty and not forced in any way, coming from the house that was so brightly lit this late at night, while the other houses were kept to themselves in darkness. Montag heard the voices talking, giving, talking, weaving, reweaving their hypnotic web. Montag moved out through the French windows and crossed the lawn. Without even thinking of it, he stood outside the talking house in the shadows, thinking he might even tap on their door and whisper, "Let me come in. I won't say anything. I just want to listen. What is it you're saying?" But instead he stood there, very cold, his face a mask of ice, listening to a man's voice, the uncle, moving along at an easy pace. After all, this is the age of the disposable tissue. Blow your nose on a person, wad them, flush them away, reach for another, blow, wad, flush, everyone using everyone else's coattails. How are you supposed to root for the home team when you don't even have a program or know the name? For that matter, what colored jersey are you wearing as they trot out on the field? Montag moved back to his own house, left the window wide, checked Mildred, tucked the covers about her carefully, and then lay down with the moonlight on his cheekbones and on the frowning ridges of his brows, with the moonlight distilled in each eye to form a silver cataract there. 1 drop of rain, Clarice, another drop, Mildred, a third, the uncle, a fourth, the fire tonight, 1 Clarice, 2 Mildred, 3 uncle, 4 fire, 1 Mildred, 2 Clarice, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Clarice, Mildred, uncle, fire, sleeping tablets, men, disposable tissue, coattails, blow, wad, flush, Clarice, Mildred, uncle, fire, tablets, tissue, blow, wad, flush, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, rain, the storm, the uncle laughing, thunder falling downstairs, the whole world pouring down, the fire gushing up in a volcano, all rushing on down around in the spurting roar and rivering stream toward nothing, toward morning. "I don't know anything any more," he said, and let a sleep lozenge dissolve on his tongue.